Thank you all for joining us today for Press Club's forum with candidates for state treasurer. Today we have Republican candidates for treasurer, Angele Davis, Senator Neil Reiser, and John Schroeder. The format for this, we are going to give each candidate about a minute and a half for opening remarks. Then start off taking some questions. I want to remind you that only members of the press club and the working media are allowed to ask questions. Candidates will be given 30 seconds to respond to each question. We have a timekeeper here. Near the end, we'll go into closing remarks. Each candidate will get a minute for that. I did want to start off by noting we do have the interim treasurer, Ron Henson, here today. Joining us, so maybe he can provide a question for us. All right, I guess to start off, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, Ms. Davis, would you like to come up and do your opening remarks?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hi, my name's Angele Davis, and I would like to be your next state treasurer. To give you a little bit about my background, I grew up in Clinton, Louisiana. I grew up hunting and fishing with my dad. I also played basketball. I earned a basketball scholarship to Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama. And then I went into the private sector and I started working on my MBA at night while I worked full time. I earned my MBA from LSU, Louisiana State University. And then I got a great call from someone who is a great mentor of mine still today. Governor Mike Foster called and asked for me to come serve as his Deputy Commissioner of Administration for his administration. And I was honored and privileged to do so. I had the opportunity to learn how the budget works and the capital outlay process, and of course experience with bond commission and working with the rating agencies. I actually was able to get 5 rating upgrades for the state of Louisiana under Governor Foster, saving millions of dollars. Next, I had the opportunity to serve as the Secretary of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, where I worked very hard to rebuild the tourism industry after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And then I got a call to serve as Commissioner of Administration for Governor Bobby Jindal. I was honored to serve with him, and I also was able to reduce $2.5 billion out of the state's budget. I was able to reduce 2,000 positions in state government. I was able to reduce wasteful spending and fraud. And I was also able to get 5 rating upgrades for the state of Louisiana. So thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you for hosting this event, the Press Club, because so few people actually know that there's an election coming up on October 14th. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Senator Neil Reiser.
Thank you. I'm State Senator Neil Reiser, and I'm a treasurer candidate for the October race, October the 14th. I want to say my qualifications. I've been self-employed for the last 32 years. I have 24 years in banking experience. In addition to that, I've served in the state Senate since 2007. During my first tenure and my first term, I chaired Labor and Industrial Relations. During my second term, I chaired Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, which is the capital outlay budget, which is the infrastructure that goes to Bond Commission. During that time, I served on Bond Commission for 4 years, which the next treasurer will chair, as he currently chairs. So I think that I have a unique combination, unique skill set between my personal experience, my 32 years of banking experience, my 24 years of banking experience, 32 years of self-employment, and my time on Revenue and Fisc and on Bond Commission, that I'm most qualified to be your next state treasurer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next up, we have former State Representative John Schroeder.
Good afternoon, and thanks for the Press Club for giving us the opportunity to talk a little about the treasurer's race. I just want to first say it's really an honor to be able to serve or have served. As most of you know, I resigned my seat. I wanted people to know that I wanted this job. It wasn't about getting some comfort spot. I was serious enough about running for treasurer that I resigned my legislative seat. I'm a former Army veteran, military CID agent, special agent. I was a narcotics detective after that, worked right not far from here out of Ascension Parish. My wife and I have been in business. I grew up in a business family. My father was an entrepreneur, and we've been in business for about 25 years. My wife's a retired administrator and school teacher, and she runs a construction company now. I was fortunate to serve in the legislature for 10 years. I served on the Appropriations Committee for about 8 of that while I was in exile for the other 2 years. But I worked very hard trying to find solutions and things we need to do better as far as our structure and how we spend money in Louisiana. I'm running for state treasurer because I'm past concerned. I'm very worried about our spending habits and the lack of discipline and how do we go about creating our budgets in Louisiana. Our bond ratings are suffering for it, and we have to learn how to live within our means and spend our money better. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you. So just to kind of get things started, I wanted to have the candidates respond to one of the, I guess, kind of the elephant in the room with this race that, you know, there's a lot of questions about what does the state treasurer actually do. A lot of people don't really seem to be that familiar with the position. So I was hoping to get each of you just to say, in your opinion, what is the one most important function of the state treasurer, and how are you better prepared for that role than your opponents? And for this, we'll start with Mr. Reiser.
Thank you. I'll go back again. Why am I most qualified to be your state treasurer? The state treasurer is the state banker. Oversees all the state money that comes in and sees the retirement systems and oversees on those boards. I'll go back again that when I speak that I've got 32 years of business experience. That experience is as a taxpayer and knowing the value of a hard-earned dollar. In my 24 years banking experience, I think that ties in perfectly with what the job does. It's the financing of the state, and the financing of your money. Now also I agree that I think that my time as Reverend Fifth's chair, that implements and has hand in hand with it, and once again I think it makes me most qualified.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder?
Somebody's going to trip over this. Look, the role of the treasurer obviously is to take care of the money in a conservative, practical way for the state. I think some of the major roles that he plays is chairman of that bond commission. Look, I've said this for many, many times now. I have voted against the capital outlay budget several times. I don't like the whole structure of it. I think it's corrupt. I don't like the pay-to-play process that we use. If you're in with a governor, you get what you need. If you're out with the governor, you don't. So I think that's got to be one of the major focuses that we change totally. You know, obviously the unclaimed properties become a big issue. Now that we have some consistent money, everybody wants to try to get their hands on that as well as we get around the state and talk to people. But I also believe that the bond rating is a large portion of why people want to come to this state, and the negative rating is affecting us. Well, what affects that is our poor spending and our debt. So that's got to get under control. As a businessman, I did that every day in my private world and in my business world. We have to respond the same way as the state. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Elizabeth. One of the most important things that the state treasurer is responsible for is the treasurer is actually the face of Louisiana to Wall Street. So the treasurer actually has to work with the rating agencies in order to ensure that we are getting the highest rating that we can possibly get for Louisiana. Under 2 different governors, I had the opportunity to work with the rating agencies, and collectively I was able to get 10 rating upgrades for the state of Louisiana, which saved millions of dollars that were able to be invested in economic development and infrastructure projects. I also know that the state treasurer is also responsible for the cash management practices. The state treasurer, I've got 30 seconds. The state treasurer is responsible for the cash management practices. The state treasurer serves as the chair of bond commission. And the state treasurer also is responsible for being an independent voice from the other statewide elected positions. An independent voice that can bring transparency and accountability to state government, very similar to what John Kennedy did. He was able to be a watchdog for many of our taxpayers in the state of Louisiana, and I will continue to do that same thing. I will serve as an independent voice to make sure that we are making good public policy decisions. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to open questions up to the floor. I ask that questions be limited to members of the working media and members of the press club, and also just keep in mind that this is a forum, and so we would like for the questions to be things that all of the candidates can respond to. Sue?
First question, all of these things that you listed are important, but one of the things that the state treasurer does and can help Louisiana's bottom line is the state treasurer is responsible for investing the state's funds. Tell us about your expertise with that.
All right, the question is for the candidates to discuss their expertise in investments, and we're going to start with Mr. Schroeder.
You know, quite simply, I mean, I've invested a lot of money in my own world. You know, at the end of the day, it really comes down to having a conservative approach on how you do things. I don't think the state can afford or ill afford to lose any money. So I think it's very important to sort of pick up the baton where John has left off to Kennedy and the current treasurer, and carry that ball. My whole background is conservative as far as being in the business world. You have to learn to invest. I have to return an investment plus make money. So I mean, that's the nature of what that does. I mean, a dollar, you have to invest a dollar, get a dollar back, and hopefully you get a little money back. But I think the conservative nature of investing is the same principle that I've followed throughout my business career.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, I've served on significant private sector boards, boards that have invested significant amounts of dollars with excellent returns. I also have served on several state government boards, retirement system boards, where we have had to monitor the investments and the investment policies. You're right, the state treasurer has a very significant role to play and is responsible for making sure that our investment policies are up to date. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to do as state treasurer. I would like to take a look at the investment policies and bring my private sector experience in public finance and investment to the table to make sure that those policies are getting us the strongest return on investment that we can possibly get for our state. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Reiser.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I'll tell you what I'm not in favor of. I'm in favor of sound banking practices. And what we've had some of our money invested in, I'm going to give you an example of one of them. It's been invested in golf courses. That was one of them, and I can tell you clearly that is not good banking practices. You're gambling at that point. You're no longer taking your risk. If you have a bond rating, a AA, AAA, then you know what your risk is. But when you start doing stuff like with golf courses, we had some retirements that did that, and they became insolvent or practically insolvent. And so we want to make sure our retirements and we have just don't sound banking practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience? Mark.
My question to all three of them is, are you going to use this post as a stepping ground to a higher office, as two of the last three treasurers have done?
All right, the question for our candidates is, do you see this post as an opportunity for you to move on to a higher office from here, as past treasurers have? And we are going to start with Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mark. I've never run for public office before, and I've actually never planned to run for public office before, but our state is faced with such significant fiscal challenges and economic challenges that I felt that my experience could help bring solutions to the table. And I am not interested in furthering a political career that I never started and will not start until October 14th, hopefully, or in November. I'm more interested in bringing solutions to the table, and my qualifications are very well suited for the office of state treasurer. The state treasurer is a statewide elected office. It's a statewide elected leader, and I will use my qualifications and experience to help bring solutions to the table for our state. Thank you. And that answer was no, just in case you didn't get that one. No.
Thank you. Mr. Reiser.
Mark, I have no intention for running for another office. I had no intention for running, I ever thought, nor would I run for the state senate. To answer your question, that I have no intention of doing that. I feel like it's a job well suited for me. It's a job that I feel like I'm very qualified for. Thank you.
And Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you, Mark. You know, I have no intention. I mean, I ran for state treasurer because I want to take the things that I've done for the last 9-10 years, fighting against some of these bad policies from the legislative standpoint, and just being one of 105 and started getting lost. It's nice having all these cameras in here. We didn't have any cameras when I was fighting on a budget committee. The treasurer's office will give me the opportunity to take what we've been working on for 9 years. We've shown some things that we need to do through legislation, a lot of different things. So I think being able to do that from the treasurer's seat will be a little easier for me to effect change. But my intentions are to fix the spending habits of this state. We don't start spending what we have, and not every dime we think we're going to have, we just soon go to the House. That's my intent, and that's what I'll do when I'm elected state treasurer.
Thank you. Another question?
Yes, I detected just a little bit of kind of criticism here on our current administration. So my question is, we have the big election in 2019. Do you see yourselves endorsing the Republican candidate for governor against John Bell?
All right, the question is, 2019 is the next governor's election. So we want to know, do you plan to endorse the Republican candidate for governor against Governor John Bell Edwards, who has already said that he's running for re-election? And this time we are starting with Mr. Reiser.
The question again is, do I see myself in 2019 endorsing a Republican candidate? I don't think the party, whether you're Republican or Democrat, either one reflects exactly how you might believe. I'll be looking at endorsing whoever has the most conservative values. And this candidate, I have the most conservative values. I've voted for the Constitution, I've done reform, I've done workers' comp, I've done a lot of different issues that have been along those lines. There's the proof in the pudding that I have that. My voting record is there to reflect that. And I will be looking and supporting an individual that has those conservative values, that will be spending our money in a conservative way, at the same time moving our state forward in these technological times.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder.
I like these easy questions. I'm going to support the candidate who has things in common with what I believe is broken in this state, period. If that person believes we need less government, and then I'm going to support that candidate, no matter who it is. Might be you. I don't know. But I mean, to say today who I'm going to support for governor when I have no idea who's even running, but I will tell you this much. we better have somebody who, whether it's the current governor or the future governor, whoever runs against them, needs to be in a position to where they understand the fiscal nature that we face and how bad it is. Our economy's struggling. We can't afford our bills, and now's the last time that we're going to, or certainly not the best of times to raise revenue on the citizens of Louisiana. So I'm going to align myself with whoever stands for those basic principles that you have to spend what you have and not more than.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Well, I've never endorsed anybody, never been in a position to endorse anyone. I think what we need to do is we need to put the taxpayers first and not the politicians first. And I will be a candidate that always works for the taxpayers and not the politicians. And I will look for that conservative agenda in any candidate. I will look for the candidate who is in favor of a smaller government, a lower cost government that is results oriented, less regulation on small businesses so that we can stimulate economic growth in our state, which is a big problem right now. I will look for the candidate who brings and sheds transparency into state government so that every taxpayer can see how our taxpayer dollars are being spent to make sure that we're getting the best return on objective or the best return on interest. And I want to make sure that, again, we put the people of our state first and not the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from our audience?
Question. Anything to do with hard for you to look back here, but I want each person to answer. For the last 15 years, this state has been running a deficit. We haven't had any surplus. I'd like each candidate to talk about not so much slowing the economy down, not so much downsizing the state, but how we're going to grow the economy and get us out of the deficit that we continually face here.
All right, the question for our candidates is, how do you think that the state should go about growing its economy rather than just focusing on how to cut back? And this question first goes to Mr. Schroeder.
Well, there's certain things in my economy that I don't control. You know, in my business, we go to work every day and we hope that somebody comes to buy our product. If they don't do that, then I have to live within my means and lower my expenses to get by and to be able to reinvest into the next year. The difference between what I do and what government does is government has this tendency to just grow automatically, and it's outpacing the economy. So you have to have something in place that stops government from growing faster than the economy. That's our biggest problem here in Baton Rouge. The government grows faster than the economy. You can't force it. It sort of is what it is. We have to have good practices, but I'll tell you this much: no business, no major corporation likes coming into a state where we don't have our spending habits, that we don't have very good discipline when it comes to our spending habits. That's just the bottom line. That's very basic. You can't spend more money than you have, or you're going to have the kind of problems we're going through. Our economy is sluggish. Our budget grew by 3.3% last year while we were in a deficit. So you have to first start right there. So that's what I bring to the table. I've had to do that in my own business, and it's time Baton Rouge does the same thing.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
What we need to do is we need to invest in opportunities where we can stimulate our economy, where we can turn this economy around, where we can create jobs. We need less regulation on our small businesses. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to embrace President Trump's massive infrastructure agenda. We need to create jobs in the state of Louisiana. And you can only create jobs by investing in opportunities like a massive infrastructure program. And right now we have a surplus, and we need to look at that surplus very carefully. And we need to make sure that we're investing it where we can get the biggest return on our investment. Job creation is the name of the game. Everybody knows that the only way to turn your economy around is to invest in those types of opportunities where we're able to create jobs in our state. And that's what we need to do.
Okay, and Mr. Reiser.
Thank you. I'll answer your job as specifically, your question specifically as can. We have roughly $9 billion in rebates and credits. We have rebates, credits, and exclusions. Rebate is the actual rebate, write a check back, a credit you take against your account. Those that are not producing a positive ROI, positive rate of return on investment, we should not be investing your taxpayer dollars in it. So we have to find a methodology. Well, I brought this question up during the committee, repeatedly. Economic development does not have a formula. We have to have a consistent formula across the board that's showing whether or not on our return on investment, if it's not, then we should not be investing in that. We're an oil-based economy. Oil's been around $50 a barrel, and it'd be wonderful if it stayed going. But we need our money back that's not having a return on investment that's positive to the state. Thank you.
All right, another question from the audience. Robert?
Yes, hey, Robert Scott with Par. Thank all three of you for your public service. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for showing up today. As y'all know, the state has a debt limit, and the treasurer has a role to play in monitoring, calculating that debt limit. So my question to you is, if the legislature and the governor can't find a solution to this impending fiscal cliff that's coming up, it may be that Louisiana won't be able to issue new bonds to support infrastructure projects because of the state debt limit. So my question to you as treasurer, would you support renewing or sustaining the taxes to fix the fiscal cliff, or would you want the legislature to vote to suspend the debt limit, or would you want to oppose new infrastructure projects? What's your choice? Maybe there's a fourth option that we're not aware of, but that's the question before you. Do you have a bona fide role with the debt limit as a spokesman for it, as a calculator for it, as your role in the bond commission, which would be limited with a debt limit if there's a fiscal cliff problem? How do we all address this?
All right, the question is dealing with the state debt limit and how the candidates would approach their role as state treasurer. And we're going to start with Ms. Davis.
Robert, are you allowed to really ask three-part questions? Well, I'm going to go with a fourth. I think we need to prioritize our spending. We have a lot of money coming into our state. We're at a $29 billion budget, and we need to prioritize our spending. We need to invest in those areas where we can get our strongest return on investment. And if that means eliminating some statutory dedications, we need to do just that. We need to focus on, again, priorities for our state and invest in those priorities. I'm opposed to doing anything with the net state tax supported debt limit. I think that that's there for a reason. We need to remain fiscally responsible. We should not borrow any more money that exceeds the net state tax supported debt limit. I think we need to prioritize our expenditures. Thank you. Oh, I still have 10 seconds. And I'm against raising taxes on the middle class. We do not need to raise any more taxes. We've got $29 billion to work with, and we can come up with solutions. And if it takes, eliminating some statutory dedications, making sure that we're spending dollars where we get the biggest return on investment, I think we need to make that decision. We need to do good government policy making, and so often politics gets in the way of that. And that's why we still have those statutory dedications, because of the politics.
Thank you. Mr. Reiser?
Robert, by Constitution, that we have to have a balanced budget, and I will be in favor of that. The treasurer does not vote on the budget. I think we all know that. As far as reporting on a deficit or a shortfall, that is the responsibility of the treasurer to do so, and let the governor know and legislative body know that we're going to be having that. Once again, it's been used by both other candidates here, to live within our means. and we've got to find the mechanism and the willpower to do that. It's as simple as that. Is there something else out of the question that I left out or didn't answer?
Just interested in understanding from y'all, if they don't do something about the fiscal cliff, whether they're either just addressing the revenue portion of it, then we're gonna not be able, you're gonna have an issue with the debt limit. And then you have a choice of what you wanna do. Should we renew and sustain taxes so that we can maintain a debt limit so we can borrow more through the bond commission? Or should we just have a lower debt limit?
Once again, the proof's in the pudding. Would I vote, or would we to renew the taxes? I'm the only candidate here that voted against the one sales tax. So I think my position is clear on that, is not to renew that tax. We have the highest sales tax in the nation. And I'm the only one here that can say I voted against that. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder?
"60 seconds, 60 hours. Look, I'll say no to raising taxes, no to wasteful spending, as I've said. We got a $30 billion budget. We have not focused on enough on restructuring how this budget is built. I think Neil said this earlier, $7 to $9 billion in dedications. There's ways to restructure this budget to lessen the blow to the cliff, but we haven't had the political will to do that. We haven't had the leadership to do that. Some of us, to include myself, have filed bills to fix a lot of these things and just couldn't get it to where we needed to get. But that's not the reason why I'm going to raise the debt limit, or am I going to turn around and say I'm going to raise your taxes. We have to learn to live within a $30 billion budget. And if we can't do that for the size of the state we are, then none of us should be here.
Thank you. Another question?
I have a question. I kind of want to make sure I understood the answer to Robert's question. So what he's saying is the current treasurer and Commissioner Darden have said if we lose $1 billion worth of revenue, we're not going to have any money to build anything really else than we're building now. And I want to make sure I understand that you all are okay with losing that revenue and not raising the debt ceiling and essentially having no money for new projects, because that's my understanding of what would happen. But my real question is, if we're gonna cut $1 billion out of the budget, I'd like you all to tell me how much, at least $100 million of which specifically you would cut, or how you would find at least $100 million. I know you guys can do that. You're, appropriations committee member, former head of tax and revenue and fisc, and you build budgets. So I want to know specifics, not just like healthcare, like give me a program or something.
Okay, the question is specifically within the state budget, what programs or other areas do you believe need to be cut? And please be specific in that. And we start with Mr. Reiser.
Once again, my position is clear, and to talk about that, yes, I did share revenue. And many times, as you're talking about, once again, is the projects and the credits and the rebates that we have that do not, that's close to $9 billion. I led the legislation to get control of the film industry. I think we have it stabilized now, Julia, and so I think we continue to go through those. There's $9 billion, undoubtedly we can find that money inside the realms of that. And I still continue to say that, find those and specify those when it shows a non-specific ROI that's not a positive, we'll do so on those, as they individually show.
And you think the film industry doesn't have that ROI?
Excuse me?
The film tax credit?
I think we're at a happy medium with them now.
Okay.
We're happy medium, as you know, that it was not capped, that was the danger, that a lot of those programs never wasn't capped. And then you asked specifically not to be talking about LDH inside it. I think they can be restructured. I did LHFA, completely restructured a completely, like I said, once again, I haven't just talked about it, I've done it. I think we could go into Department of Health and get the money there. I really do.
Yeah, to be clear, I wasn't saying you can't cut healthcare. I was saying,
Yeah.
please tell me where you're going to cut healthcare.
Well, as a legislator, when you talk about it, it took me a solid year on Louisiana Housing Finance Authority. So you can go through, for me to sit here without going through with a staff of one, but I've already done it. I've already done those things and gone through, and we specifically go through one by one, and if it's not a positive ROI, I'll say again, that those we look at. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schroeder?
Y'all should have asked some little tougher questions that you can answer in 50 seconds instead of 60. Look, you have to start with the premise that we have money, and the citizens of this state do not want to raise their taxes. They don't want the legislature or this administration to raise their taxes. So therefore, you have no choice but to cut expenses and find out where to do it. Well, where's half the money spent in the state budget? And you know this. Half of it's spent on health care. So that's where you're going to have to start. It's grown by $3+ billion just in 2 years. So that's where you start. You can look at the state auditor's report that came out recently, and there's $40 million that they found. I could go on and on. Uncollected debt. You know, you've heard the debate in appropriations with a $14 billion or $13.5 billion DHH budget. There's the national folks think we probably are wasting somewhere around $1.3 to $1.6 billion. So until you scrub every aspect of every level of this government, then I will not support in any way, shape, or form raising the taxes on people.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis?
It's been a while since I've been in state government. I've been running a small business for the last 7 years. But I'm glad to know that the treasurer gets to cut the budget, because I'm fired up about that. So what I would do, like I said before, I think that we have an opportunity to restructure the budget so that we get rid of statutory dedications, and we need to prioritize our expenditures. We need to look at how every single dollar is being spent in state government to make sure that we're getting a strong return on investment. You cannot tell me that out of a $29 billion budget, there are not low-performing programs. There are, obviously. There's always room for improvement, and we need to take a good, hard look at how we're spending our dollars. We need to make sure that the citizens know how we're spending our dollars, so that the citizens can also hold us, state government, accountable for how their dollars are being spent. And to answer your question, where would I cut? I would cut low-performing programs. That's exactly what I would focus on, low-performing programs. And I would get rid of complete programs, not just do what state government often does. State government often cuts across the board. And when I was Commissioner of Administration, I implemented something that was called budgeting for outcomes. And that's looking at every program and every activity in state government to make sure that we're getting a strong return on our investment, and getting rid of those activities or programs where we're not getting a strong return on our investment. Thank you.
So what step are we opening up to help with the budget problem?
Look at all of them. Look at all of them.
Because we've looked at that 2 years in a row and nothing's happened about that.
And how often does politics get in the way of good public policy?
I agree.
All right, thank you. Try to get in the back here. You, sir.
Are you against the increase in gasoline sales tax in order to improve the roads in Louisiana? Yes or no?
All right, looking for a yes or no answer on this. Do you support increasing the gasoline tax to help fund infrastructure improvements in Louisiana? And we start with Mr. Schroeder.
Well, sorry, but I'm going to break the rule, I guess, because it's not a yes or no question.
It's a yes or no.
It's not. When you have to sit in the room that makes the decision, it's not that easy. The problem with the gas tax is this. Currently, the places that are booming, like St. Tanny Parish, if I don't vote the way the governor wants me to vote, I get my projects vetoed. So why would my constituents support sending more tax money into a system in Baton Rouge that if my politics doesn't match what the governor wants, he vetoes it? Now, I'm sorry, that's not yes or no. That's called blackmail. You know, that's part of the political corruption that I don't like. where's that serve the public's best interest? It doesn't. So if you want to have a local option to give St. Tammany Parish, and I use that as an example because that's where I represented, if you want to give them a local option, whether they want to pay more taxes and what they want to use it for and very specific projects and how to partnership with the state to do that, then I can live with something like that. But what I'm not willing to do is send more gasoline taxes to this process that is severely broken and they haven't proven they have the ability to fix it.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
Are you against an increase in the gasoline tax? That's the question. Are you against it? Yes, I'm against it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Reiser?
Thank you. Even though that legislation did not make it to the Senate this year, I opposed it. Openly opposed it. And it's not popular. And I'll take a stand. But you have to look into the future and what's transpiring. The fuel taxes we have it right now, in 1975, whenever we had, it was never indexed. So we have vehicles that get 50 miles a gallon now. So you have more impact on the highway. But that's not correlated to that tax base. Now we're having more electric vehicles that's coming in. So anything that you're going to do in the future needs to encompass all of this as much as the technology we possibly could do to look at it. We have to have infrastructure, we have to have bridges, and I think everybody realizes that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Beth?
This is sort of a question to see how much you've been doing research, perhaps, because it's not an area I don't know the answers to this one, and that is the people of Louisiana a number of years ago put money aside in the 8G offshore oil rig, and it was set aside in the Constitution, and it's given out, especially to K-12 education in one fashion and higher ed in another. I'm just wondering, as the treasurer, how much money is, for instance, in the K-12 pot, and how big is that pot of money, and is it being invested well? What's the rate of return on it? So that these are funds that have been already set aside that we can use in education, which everyone says they want to do. I want to know how much you know about that fund right now.
All right, the question is how much do each of the candidates know about the money that has been placed into certain funds to benefit K through 12 and higher education? What are their rate of returns on investment right now, and how healthy are those pots of money? And for this one, we have Ms. Davis first.
Now, Beth, you should have told me you were going to answer that question so I could have looked it up before I got here. The treasurer is responsible for billions of dollars in investments and all the funds that the treasurer is responsible for. And that fund is a very significant fund. And I don't know where the current return on investment is for that fund, but I know that they're all pretty low because of market conditions and the way that the state is limited in how it can invest in its dollars. I would like to take a look at the investment policy of the state to make sure that we are getting a very strong return on our investment, particularly in those larger funds like the AG fund. I think it's really important, and I think that could be part of the solution to some of our state's fiscal crises that we're faced with right now. We have to do everything we can to get the best return on investment, and I will work very hard to do that.
A ballpark on how much the AG is? Ballpark.
Well, there's billions. I mean, I don't want to ballpark and say, so. I mean, there's...
So it's not insignificant?
No, it's very significant, yeah.
All right, Mr. Reiser.
Thank you. I can't give you a specific dollar amount, but it goes back to what the rate of return is. We're in a low rate environment, and I think that you still should have sound banking investments. As we spoke about earlier, I talked about should not be making investments like in golf courses. You can have a bad investment pretty quick and make a lot of things insolvent. Monies that were dedicated and allocated to a certain specific program should be spent there.
You don't have any idea?
I can't give you a specific amount. Thank you. But if it's allocated specific to that, Absolutely, should be spent there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder?
I got this now. Look, I don't know what the balance of that fund is. I will tell you this much, that I do believe that funds that are created for very specific uses, that money should be used for those specific uses. And I have fought for legislation for over 10 years, at least 9 years now, to stop using money that will put in funds for any other specific use other than that use. As far as the return, you know, it should face the same scrutiny that every dollar we spend. We have to treat a penny like a dollar, whether it's in the education fund, transportation trust fund. It really shouldn't matter which fund it is. Our returns need to be conservative and utilized properly.
So I'm getting a sense that you all are saying maybe we should look at how you can invest funds, because this is a long-term fund. This isn't a fund that, you know, it's been there for a long time.
Right.
And should it have different, as a treasurer, you know, you can make advice on investments, and for long-term, you invest differently than you do for short-term.
Sure.
So you're suggesting perhaps we should examine.
Sure, I think you should examine all policy, all best practice, no matter what the fund is, whether it's education or some other fund.
All right. I think we're quickly running out of time, so at this point we would like to have each of the candidates come up to make closing remarks and kind of give them an opportunity to touch on anything that we haven't covered in today's forum. And we're going to start with Mr. Reiser.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to start off where I began at. I feel like I'm the most qualified candidate to be your state treasurer. 32 years experience in the private sector, 24 years in banking. I've been on Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, now going on 11 years. I chaired that 4 of those years. I've been on Bond Commission 4 years. With the next treasurer the next treasurer will chair that also. And also, I think that we need a treasurer that can work with everyone, not just one individual. My record is clear. I have a clear conservative voting record, the most conservative voting record of anyone in this race. At the same time, though, I'm able to work across the aisle with anyone. My door's always been open, always continue to be, and I'll work to move the state forward. You have my word. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schroeder?
Well, I have most of my adulthood have been spent in public service now, between my military service, serving our country, serving the state, fighting the war on drugs in the streets of this country, being a small businessman, being in the legislature for 10 years. I don't know what the definitions of conservative is anymore. I would tell you this. I want somebody that has a proven record of standing up and fighting for the taxpayer. The biggest problem we face as a state is 2 problems. 1, our spending habits, and 2, public education. Those are the 2 fronts that I've spent all of my time on as a leader in the legislature. I would ask you to consider supporting me for treasurer. I think that my qualifications speak for themselves. My record speaks for itself. I want somebody, if not me, I want somebody who's going to stand up to status quo. And I don't mean that as in a Republican or Democrat way. If a Democrat governor's in office and he's right, I'll stand up. Under a Republican governor, I got kicked off of appropriations. I want somebody who's just going to stand up for what's right for the taxpayers and not what's right for my personal politics or what's going on in Baton Rouge. So I humbly ask you to please support me for treasurer, and please go out and vote on October 14th, because the statistics say that only about 5 or 6 of the people in this room are going to vote. Everybody else is going to stay home, cook gumbo, eat jambalaya, and watch LSU hopefully beat Auburn.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis for closing remarks.
Thank you so much. And I'd really like to thank the Press Club again for doing this, because it's so important. And as I travel across the state, so few people understand that there's an upcoming election. And so few people know that there's a statewide election on the ballot. And so thank you for getting the message out for us. Also, I would like to say that I have the experience. I've developed state budgets. I've worked with the legislature. I've worked with different administrations. I've got a background in public policy. I have reduced the state budget. I've reduced the size of state government. And I want to continue to work for the taxpayers of our state. I've never run for public office before. I would be honored to be elected as your next state treasurer. I will work tirelessly. I'm honest. I'm a conservative. I'm a mom. I've run a small business for the past 7 years. I am uniquely qualified for this position. I am not looking at this as a stepping stone. I do not have political aspirations. Our state is facing significant challenges, and we need people to come together, to work together, to solve the problems of our state. And we also need to do a better job of informing our taxpayers where their dollars are being spent, and I will do that. I will make sound investment policies. I will make sure that I safeguard our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. I will make sure that I'm a voice for the taxpayers and not for the politicians. And again, I'd be honored to have your vote. And if you're going to the LSU Auburn game on the 14th, please vote early. Thank you so much.
All right, we'd like to thank all of our candidates for coming out today, and we invite you to stick around and mingle with people if you have some time afterward. October 14th, the treasurer's race is the only statewide office on the ballot, so make sure to go out and vote.